Hello everyone. Today we are going to see a poem, Sonnets from the Portuguese. The first sonnet by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Let's see a little bit about Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She was an English poet and she lived during the Victorian era, and she was the wife of Robert Browning, another famous poet who lived during the same era. So let's see a little bit about the Victorian era. It was an age of religious fervor. It was an age where there was a lot of uh, conflict going on between science and religion. So the poets who wrote during that period wrote about such themes. But if we look at Elizabeth Browning, she wrote a lot about love and the conflicts which she faced before she met her husband. So this entire poem is a reflection of that conflict which was running through her mind. Now, sonnets from the Portuguese consist of 44 sonnets, but today we are going to look only at the first sonnet. So, Barry Browning was born in England, uh, County Durham, and she wrote poetry from the age of 11. And her mother was a great influence in her life, as was the rest of her family. But when she was 15 years old, she fell from a horse and she injured her spine, and she suffered a lot after that. She had a lot of health issues. Later on, she developed tuberculosis, which affected her lungs, and that also created a lot of problem in her mind, a lot of conflict, a lot of issues in her mental health also, because she felt that she would never marry, she would never meet a man who would actually uh, love her a lot. So that was how she was living. Uh, During the 1840s, she was introduced to the literary society through her cousin John Kenyon, and she started publishing her collection of poems. And she started writing very prolifically during 1841 and 1844, whereby she produced a lot of poetry, translation, and prose. One of her other important themes was the abolition of slavery. Even though her family had owned plantations in Jamaica where there were a lot of slaves working, Elizabeth Barrett Browning did not really approve of it, and she talked about and she wrote in her works about the abolition of slavery. So she was kind of criticized for that also. And then she wrote a volume of poems in 1844. It was published in 1844, and there was a lot of admiration for those poems. There was a lot of critical acclaim for those poems, and it attracted the attention of one of the poets during that era, Robert Browning. And that started a correspondence between both the writers. And Robert Browning expressed his admiration for Elizabeth, and he wrote in one of his letters, and I quote, I love your verses with all my heart, dear Miss Barrett. And he praised the fresh, strange music, the affluent language, the exquisite pathos, and true, new, brave thought. So that is how their correspondence started, and it went on for quite some time, whereby both of them expressed their love for each other. Now, we have a lot of other correspondences, a lot of other love letters, a lot of other famous love letters in um, history. Like you have John Keats and Fanny Brown, then you have Napoleon Bonaparte and Josephine, you have Scott Fitzgerald, you have Franz Kafka. All these great writers have become famous also for their love letters. All right, so Barry Browning and Robert Browning were also come. They also come under the same category. Uh, the problem again with Elizabeth and Robert Browning's love story was that she felt that her father would not approve of their love, and that is why she kept it hidden from the public eye, from her own family for a very, very long time. And but when Robert Browning expressed his love, and she could not resist him after that. And both of them they eloped to Italy, where they had a son also called Pen. Um, Sonnets from the Portuguese is actually it was published in 1850, but she started writing it from 1845-46 through 1847. So it is kind of Um, you can say it was a love letter of sorts to Robert Browning. It has a lot of, over the 44 sonnets, it shows a lot of depth and varying emotions which she faced during her courtship with Robert Browning. First, if you look at the first nine sonnets, sonnet 1 to sonnet 9, there is a lot of disappointment, a little bit of conflict, where she feels that she questions if this person is really for her. And because till that point of time she had never believed that she would find love. And as we go on through sonnet 10 and till 44, it changes. The conflict changes to love, and then at the end there is a lot of hope. So that is the kind of the trajectory that this entire sonnet takes. But unfortunately, she died when she was just 51 years old. She died in 1861, so probably just she was just 55 years old. And her works have had a major influence on poets like Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Dickinson, and especially sonnet number 43, which says, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." So that has become a very famous line in literature. Um, she also portrayed a lot of religious theme in her poems, because she had read a lot, because of her frailty, because of her fragile health. She was forced to stay at home during her childhood, so that made her read a lot. She had read Milton's Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno. Now, Sonnets from the Portuguese, of course, it was published in 1850, and during the poet's lifetime and even after so, it is very popular. Uh, Now, since their love affair, their courtship was kept as a big secret from the public eye and also from her family, she did not want everyone to know that it was she who had written it. So, she wanted to not publish the poem, but her husband, Robert Browning, he insisted that since they were the best of sequence of English language sonnets, he forced her, he almost urged her to publish the poems. But she would still wanted a lot of privacy, so she wanted to publish it from, like under the title Sonnets from Bosnia. But then, since Browning used to call her My Little Portuguese, he suggested that she publish it as Sonnets from the Portuguese. So that is also a kind of reference, a kind of acknowledgement of Robert Browning's love for her. Um, Now, all these 44 sonnets were presented to Robert Browning in 1847, and when they had secretly eloped to Italy. So you have, so we have the first sonnet now. So we'll look at the first sonnet. Let me just read the sonnet out for you. I thought once how Theocritus had sung of the sweet years, the dear and wished for years, who each one in a gracious hand appears to bear a gift for mortals, old or young. And as I mused it in his antique tongue, I saw in gradual vision through my tears the sweet, sad years, the melancholy years, those of my own life, who by turns had flung a shadow across me. Straightway I was aware, so weeping, how a mystic shape did move behind me and drew me backwards by the hair. And a voice said in mastery while I strove, "Guess now who holds thee." "Death," I said. But there the silver answer rang, "Not death, but love." So this is the first sonnet. So as is very evident from the way the poem moves, the way the lines move, and especially at the end, it shows the turmoil in her heart, the turmoil in her mind, because of the love which she was receiving from Robert, and which she, of course, never expected. Because she was an invalid, she was fragile, she was of ill health, she never could believe that a man like Robert Browning could love her as much as he did. So if you look at the first line, there is a reference to a Greek philosopher, a Greek classical philosopher called Theocritus, and it shows how deeply involved and how deeply knowledgeable she was of classical literature. So she talks about Theocritus, who had sung of the sweet years that dared and wished for years. So here, when she is talking about the sweet years that dared and wished for years, is probably her past when she was very happy with her family. Her mother was alive, her sisters and brothers were all together, and she had quite an enjoyable childhood, even though she was suffering from ill health. There was uh, no lack of money in her family. The family itself was financially sound because of the plantation and the money coming from the slaves also. So she's reminiscing about the sweet years that dear wished for years, and she is bringing in a philosophical bent of mind when she's talking about Theocritus, who each one in a gracious hand appears to bear a gift for mortals, old or young. So the past is bringing her gifts, for both the old and the young. It is bringing hope for the future, because when you are young, obviously you feel that the world is in front of you, that you are blessed and you have a lot of work to do. So it is bringing in a gift for both old and the young. And as I mused it in his antique tongue, so here she's bringing in the first person when she puts herself in the position. So she's always talking from her point of view in these sonnets. I saw in gradual vision through my tears the sweet, sad years, the melancholy years, those of my own life. So now there is again a turmoil here, a conflict here when she talks about the dear and wished for years, and here she talks about the sweet, sad, and the melancholy years. So there is, of course, because she was financially sound and she was with her family, those were good years, those were sweet years. But here again, because of her frailty, because of her ill health, the sweet years become the sad years, and they also become melancholy years. So when we talk about melancholy, we should also remember the poems which she had written during her childhood. So through that melancholy, through that deep, thoughtful uh, persona that she had, she could write a lot of poetry. So now she's becoming very personal when she says that those of my own life who by turns had flung a shadow across me. So though they were the sweet years, though they were the dear and wished for years, uh, those years they were also sad and melancholic, and because of that melancholy, it had thrown an entire shadow on her, because she was not hopeful for a happy life in her future. And she is saying, straight away I was aware, so weeping how a mystic shape did move behind me. So she's saying she was aware that some shadow had moved behind her, and it was she was weeping, the shadow was weeping, and uh, the shadow moved in behind her, and the shape is mystic. Alright, so she again puts in a kind of religious thing over there where she says it is mystic. So there is an aura of mystery, there is an air of suspense when that shape moves up behind her. And obviously, because she is in her melancholic mind, she is in a sad mind, what does she think? She thinks that it is death, and drew me backward by the hair, and a voice said in mastery while I strove. So that shape, it holds her by the hair and it moves her back. And she asks, she's astounded, of course, and she's wondering who it is. And that voice, it's a very masterful voice. That is very important in this line. It is not a weak, it is not a shallow, it is not a pathetic voice, but it is a masterful voice. And she's struggling, she strives against that against that mystic shape which has taken hold of her. And when that shape asks her who it is, she says death. But there the silver answer rang, not death but love. So she had been thinking that death is going to encapsulate her, death is going to cover her, death is going to hold her in its grip, but actually it was nothing but love. So again, it is a reflection, this sonnet is a reflection of the turmoil which she had been undergoing for a very long time. And she's thinking that it is death which is going to take hold of her, but again, that hope. The last word over here suggests a hope for her future, and that is the first sonnet. So it shows how like how the travel which she does, the kind of movement which she makes from disappointment, from disapproval, from hopelessness, and then she's moving towards hope. So that is the sonnet for you all, sonnet one of Portuguese, sonnets from the Portuguese. Thank you.